19th video in a big series where I'm teaching deep dive, comprehensive lessons on the top 25 jazz standards for guitar players. There's a link to a playlist of this entire series in the description. The song we are learning today is the ultra famous bossa nova hit, The Girl From Ipanema. If you're here to just learn the chords, or just learn the melody with the tab, or just learn what scales you need to improvise over The Girl From Ipanema, just use the timestamp links in the description to go to the section that you're looking for. We cover all of that stuff. Here's what we're going to go over in this lesson. First, I'll tell you about the song The Girl From Ipanema and why it's worth learning. Then I'll teach you the melody by clearly demonstrating it on the guitar with notation and tab on the screen. I'll teach you both the easiest chord shapes and the most common jazz guitar chord shapes you can play for this song, all with chord diagrams on the screen. I'll teach you the scales you can use to improvise over The Girl From Ipanema, all with demonstrations and scale diagrams on the screen. Every lesson in this series includes also a unique piece of advice on how to truly internalize a jazz standard, so I will demonstrate and talk about that. And lastly, I will give you a guitar listening recommendation for this song. You can access and download the learning resources from this whole lesson series and from my other lessons on YouTube by becoming a premium supporter. There's a link in the top of the description to join. You'll get PDFs of the chord progression lead sheet, the scale breakdown sheets for soloing, the scale diagrams, the chord shape diagrams, and a custom-made backing track with me comping. You'll get everything except for the melody sheet music, but you can easily learn the melody from this video. That's because this song is not in the public domain. When a song is in the public domain, I do provide the melody and tabs as well. Just use the link in the top of the description to join and support and get all of those extra resources, not just for this lesson and not just for this jazz series, but for my other lessons on YouTube as well. You can also go to soundguitarlessons.com/join. The Girl From Ipanema, or Garota de Ipanema, is one of the most recognized and widely recorded songs in the history of not just jazz music or bossa nova or even popular music, but just music, period. According to some sources, it is the second most recorded song of all time, coming in second place just after Summertime. I did a lesson on Summertime. It was number 8 in this series, so check that out if you are interested. The Girl From Ipanema was composed in 1962 by the prolific superstar Brazilian guitarist and bossa nova composer Antônio Carlos Jobim, with original Portuguese lyrics by Vinícius de Moraes. The English lyrics, which helped the song achieve international fame, were written by Norman Gimbel in 1964. The inspiration for the song was indeed a real person. Her name was Eloisa, a young woman who often walked past a bar that is now called Garota de Ipanema in the Ipanema neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro. And supposedly this woman caught the attention of both Jobim and Moraes, and they wrote the song about her. The song became a global sensation following the 1964 recording for the album Getz Gilberto, which featured American saxophonist Stan Getz, Brazilian guitarist João Gilberto, and vocals by Astrud Gilberto, João's wife at the time. The album won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year in 1965, and the song recording itself also won a Grammy as Record of the Year. The Girl From Ipanema is a classic bossa nova, the genre that fuses samba rhythms with jazz harmonies and jazz sensibilities. And it's typically played in F major, though the famous recording that I just mentioned is in D flat major. But we're going to learn it in F because that is what it's most typically played in, and I want to teach you the standards, the way the standards are played, so you can jam on them. But I will do a lesson in the future on exactly how to play this song the way that it was played on the record. So make sure you're subscribed and staying tuned to catch that. The Girl From Ipanema follows a 32-bar AABA form with an unusually long B section and also very unusual harmonies. In fact, the harmony is so confusing that many musicians puzzle over it for years and still don't fully make sense of it. But I am going to show you a little trick to make it feel a lot simpler and easier to remember in this lesson. Today, The Girl From Ipanema is considered an essential standard for jazz and bossa nova musicians, and literally everybody recognizes this song, so it's a great one to have in your back pocket. Let's get started by learning the melody. Here's the lead sheet for Girl From Ipanema. I'll play you this in a second on the guitar. I'll show you the notation and tab for where to play it on the guitar as I play, but just an overview so we can look at if there's anything worth pointing out. And in this one, all I want to say is let's acknowledge how syncopated it is. That means that the off beats are emphasized and the strong beats are de-emphasized. So the strong becomes weak, weak becomes strong. The rhythm is very displaced. And that's such a feature of this genre and such a feature of this song. And this song is so ubiquitous, as I mentioned earlier, that we probably, most of us have a watered down version in our heads that is not as syncopated as this. So it's worth working on that. And it can be really tricky to decipher with all of these ties and everything like that, but it's worth it. So just pointing out, that's normal that's challenging to get that. But it's really fun to get it right and not do the more watered down version. So anyway, let's jump in and just do the demonstration and show you all that on the screen so you can learn it that way. Now I'll play you the melody with the guitar tab and notation on the screen. I encourage you to practice along with this demonstration as you are working on the melody. Here it is at 130 beats per minute. Say one more thing about the melody, and that's how much it is emphasizing extensions. Here's 1, 3, 5, 7, 1. This is F major 7. And so those are the essential chord tones, but the melody is going 2, 7, 7, 6, 2, 7, 7, 6, and then chords are changing under it while it's repeating that. And it's playing different extensions. Extensions are the non-essential chord tones, the color tones, the extra tones. This adds a lot of flavor and depth, density, richness to it, but also kind of a floaty, soft sound and feeling. And so da, 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 during the C7 chord, da, 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 that's the 9 of C7. And it's happening in the bridge, really emphasized in the bridge. That first note of we'll talk about the chords in the bridge in a second, but if I go to that F sharp minor chord, da, 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 that note that's lasting for more than a measure is the 9. And so it's not just playing the 9 as a passing tone or something like that. No, it is the main chord tone. And then when it goes to the next phrase, same thing. Here's G minor with a 9. So the feeling of this song melodically and how it's harmonized, those extensions are a big part of it. So I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, and knowing that can help us remember it and understand what's happening better. Let's move on. Here's the chords section. There's a lot to say about the chords. I, of course, will demonstrate them on the guitar with chord shapes and all of that for you. But let's analyze a little bit and check out what's happening. So we have our main chord of the key. The key is F in this case, tonic chord. And then we have a whole step up, dominant 7th chord. This very often is played with a sharp 11. You can absolutely add that in the famous recording, which is the one I'm referencing to get all of the harmony, the iconic recording that I talked about. It's just a dominant 7th chord off the 2 is how I would think of it. Dominant 7th chord off the 2. And then it goes to 2, 5, 1, back to the key that it started in. And this also is interpreted differently very often, but in that famous recording, it's just a 2-5-1. It's just a dominant 7th chord back to 1. The way this is so often played, and if you look it up in the real book, you'll see a G flat 7 here, where it's a half step above this and resolving down to it. That is a tritone substitution dominant 7 from here, which means it's treating this as like a altered C7 chord. I talked about that function in my last video on Body and Soul. But in that recording, it's just it makes it so much simpler and smoother to just play a normal 2-5-1 here, especially for improvising over it. And even if someone plays that crunchy chord there, you thinking of it as just C7 is going to work beautifully, and it's going to be fine. So just a 2-5-1 back to F. And then we have this just up a half step modulation, not even any sort of, not even easing into it in any kind of way. In the last video in Body and Soul, we also did a half step up modulation. We did a 2-5 into it. And I said, hey, if you want to modulate, just do 2-5 into anything. Well, or you could just jump to it. It just goes up, and it has a beautiful sound. And this B section is the section that is so kind of puzzling and confusing. So I will show you a little breakdown of it on the guitar after I just demonstrate all the chord shapes for you. But I want to explain it here as well. So what's happening here, let's jump to this one. We have this minor 7 chord, and then you can think of this as the dominant 7th chord in relation to this dominant 7th chord that is from on the flat 6 of it, distance, just to say the distance. I'm not saying anything about it functionally, but just, okay, this is a minor 6 up. I think of it as the flat 6 of this. Okay, well, let's look here, and oh, the same thing is happening here. How do you know that? Well, everybody thinks about these things differently. I honestly just see it on the fretboard in my mind. I just think of everything on the fretboard. So what's the 5 of G? It's D. Up a half step from D is E flat. Oh, that's the flat 6. Okay. Now you don't have to remember that. That's not the point. The point is that the relationship from here to here is the exact same as the relationship from here to here. So we have a minor 7 chord, or definitely minor 9 chord, because that melody note is the 9, as we talked about. That's that spot right there. So minor 9 chord to that dominant 7th chord off the flat 6 of where it came from. Another minor 9 chord, and then the dominant 7th chord off the flat 6. And then here we just have a 2-5-2-5 leading back to this makes a lot of sense. This is like 3-6-2-5 back to 1, just with altered dominant chords. And we'll talk about that in the scale section for how to improvise over those. The point is, this chord here is actually the one that makes it really confusing. Because how do you make sense of this to this and then this to this? Like those first 4 chords seem like they don't make any sense. They're not related to each other at all. But check this out. The relative minor chord of a major chord is, well, let's put it in the key of C for a second. A C major 6 chord is the same exact notes as an A minor 7 chord. Okay, A minor 7 and C major 6 have the exact same notes as each other. And major 6 and major 7 are the same function. They're interchangeable completely. So let's think of this as like a G flat 6 chord for a second. Okay, well, E flat is the relative minor chord. So E flat minor would be the relative minor from here. So if this was G flat 6, it would be the exact same pitches as E flat minor. Okay, E flat minor, if this were E flat minor, which it could be. Straight up, E flat minor is like G flat 6, same notes, and major 7 and major 6 are interchangeable. So hey, what if this was E flat minor? And you'll see a very cool way to think of this on the guitar in a second, where it's just going to look shape-wise and feel exactly the same, all of these. So you'll remember it a lot better. But okay, if this is E flat minor, oh, well then that distance is the exact same. This is the flat 6 distance from E flat minor. Okay, now you don't have to label it the way I do. That's just how I think in my brain. That's the flat 6 distance. But E flat minor to this is the same distance as this to this, same distance as this to this, same distance as this to this, if that's E flat minor. So you change that to E flat minor, the relative minor, and then you have a sequence of motions that actually makes a lot of sense. Now, hang with me for just a second, and let's flip this and think about it differently. What if all of these were the major version? So if this is G flat major, and then what if we put a 2 before all of those dominant 7th chords? Well, then we would get a really common jazz sequence where you have a major chord, and then you go to the minor version of that major chord. So let's call this F sharp for a second, same root, F sharp major 7, and then F sharp minor to 5. And then it's very common for a 2-5 to just bail and go to something else, right? So it's not actually going to resolve. And then it starts over another sequence in another place. So the F sharp here, the relative major is A major. So this could be A major for 2 measures, and then A minor to D7, that's a 2-5. And then this could be B flat major for 2 measures, and then B flat minor to E flat. So I don't want that to be confusing for you. It likely might be, but the point is that takes something that just seems like it comes from absolutely nowhere and puts it into yes, it's a sequence. The fact that it jumps to these various, like repeating the same thing at different distances, that's not confusing at all. It's more just like, how are these chords chosen? So within each 4 measures, we can do something that feels really harmonically common, and then manipulate it around to make it more sparse and weird and interesting and not as straightforward. And essentially that's what Jobim did, whether it was on purpose or not. You can take harmony that is really straightforward, remove some chords, remove the 2s from the 5s, change the major chord to the relative minor or the relative minor to the relative major, and start flipping things around to have it just be more obscure. And that's my kind of reverse engineering of this. And the whole point of it is not to say, here's the correct thing that's happening. No, that's not how I think of things at all. It's just to make sense of it for me so I can remember it and so I can understand it and feel like it's a language that clicks for me. And that's what works. So if any of that, even the tiniest bit, felt helpful, good. Don't worry about getting all of it. And you can always come back and think of that again. I'm going to show you on the fretboard as well after I show you the chords. So let's jump and just show you the chord shapes, and then we'll move on from there. Now I'll play you 2 different versions of the chord shapes for this tune. I'll play each chord once each time a chord changes, and I will show you the chord shape diagrams on the screen as I play. I encourage you to practice along with these demonstrations as you're working on getting the chords down. First, I'll play you the chords using the simplest chord shapes possible. These are often called shell voicings, just the root, the 3rd, and the 7th, or the root, the 3rd, and the 6th of every chord. It has the complete information we need without any of the extra stuff, and it sounds really good. These are widely used in jazz, even by professional players. So here's that demonstration at 130 beats per minute. Now I'll play you the more common jazz guitar chord shapes for the Girl from Ipanema. These have an extra note in them, so they fill out the sound a little more. Sometimes those extra notes are extensions, sometimes they're just the 5 of the chord, but either way it's a 4-note chord instead of 3 notes, and so it's going to give us more information and color. Here's that demonstration at also 130 beats per minute. section is pretty straightforward, right? Major 7, tonic chord, up a whole step to dominant 7, turn it minor, that's now 2, 5, back to 1. Well, that is the same A section as the tune Take the A Train, which was number 7 in this lesson series. On C major, 1 chord, up a whole step, dominant 7, turn it minor, 2, 5, 1. The Take the A Train needs to have that in there, though you don't have to play it, but the melody plays it. That's the sharp 11 of that dominant 7. And like I said, that is very often played in Girl From Ipanema. So that sound can be there or not. That's totally optional, but pretty cool how these things overlap. Supposedly, Jobim intentionally borrowed it from Ellington because he was a fan, but just as you learn more tunes, these things, you're learning more than one song at once every time you learn a little sequence like that that can be reused. So think of it that way. Oh, I'm playing the chord progression to Girl From Ipanema. It's also the same chord progression as the A section of Take the A Train. And you want to be thinking in relative terms, which was one of my internalization tips in this series, not thinking F major 7, G7. No. The 1 chord, up a whole step to dominant 7, turn that. So you're thinking in relationships, therefore in any key you're playing it in, the C major or the F or anywhere else, it actually feels the same. You're processing it the same and you're hearing it the same. That allows you to play in any key. Okay, let's break down that bridge information that we talked about with the lead sheet, but on the guitar. I think you're really going to like this. This is so cool because all of that theory sounds confusing until you do it on the fretboard and then you realize, oh, now I actually see it. Because the shapes end up being the same for things if you do the right thing on the fretboard. So knowing a bunch of voicings helps a lot, and I'm going to show you a few right now. So here's the G flat major 7, and that's the melody note right there of the bridge. Da, 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 do, da, do, da, da. Okay, but check this out. That's that melody note right there. This voicing here is straight up a first inversion voicing with the 3rd on the bottom of G flat major 7. Here's the 3rd, here's the root, here's the 5th, and here's the 7. Okay, you're skipping the A string. 3rd, root, 5th, 7. String 6, fret 6, fret 4 on string 4, fret 6 on string 3, fret 6 on string 2. Just so you're making sure you get that, okay? Now we can go well, we can just straight up do a chord melody, not as our main goal, but it just happens and it helps us understand really what's happening. That's why I love chord melody, other than the sound of it and playing it, but I love how it helps me understand things better. That's why I have a whole course on it called Chord Melody Magic. So here is that again, and now you got a bar for that one, and then play a B9 over here, and then a B7 with the 3rd on top. Okay, I'll play that one more time. Okay, I'm emphasizing that a lot because we're actually going to repeat that exact same thing 3 times, because check it out. The next chord is F sharp minor 9. Here's F sharp, the root right here. Here's a shell voicing of F sharp, as we learned in our shell voicings. 1, flat 3, flat 7. Here's 9, so here's F sharp minor 9. And this is the 5 if you go down a string. Now you have a rootless voicing of F sharp minor 9, 5, flat 3, flat 7, 9. And what do we notice? Oh my gosh, it's the exact same physical shape as this first inversion major 7 chord. Oh, so it's not that you have to change your thinking of the chord. We're just using voicings that help us understand it now. This sure thing can still be G flat major 7, first inversion. And this can be F sharp minor 9, second inversion, which means the 5th is on the bottom. And I just love the sound of that. I personally like the 5 down here more than the root. It just fills out the sound in a way I like. So now we can do precisely the same thing. Whoa! So F sharp minor 7, play that melody stuff, and then D9, and then D7 with the 3rd on top. Okay, well, what's going to happen next? Now we have G minor 9. Okay, half step up, same thing. Even even just for the sake of understanding that bridge and seeing it in a way that is just purely a sequence. It's a melodic sequence, and now harmonically and physically, it's the same thing repeated 3 different times in 3 different places. Okay, so it's here. And then you go up 3 frets from where you were. And then you go up 1 fret from where you just were. And then the rest of it is this beautiful 2, 5, 2, 5. So nothing needs to be explained there. A minor 7 to D, essentially D altered. I like this voicing of it a lot, which was in my chord shapes that I showed you. But I hope you find that helpful. If you've struggled with that bridge, I think that should be helpful. If this is all new to you, then know that you just got a big shortcut for understanding it on the fretboard, and I think a very cool arrangement for playing it as a chord melody. So do work on that if you are interested in this song. Now I will show you the scales you need to be able to improvise and solo over the Girl from Ipanema. I will demonstrate and show diagrams of all the scales in one position that's overlapping on the fretboard so we can connect our ideas together. First, let's do an overview of a scales sheet that I put together that shows the scales and chords. Then I'll demonstrate all of that. Here's our scales sheet. Well, we're in the key of F major. First chord is F major. It comes from the F major scale. G mixolydian is the scale, same as the scale of C major. It's the 5th mode of C major. That's the chord. That's the scale to play over a dominant 7th chord when it's the 2 of a key in particular. If this had the sharp 11 in it, you would want to play a mode called Lydian dominant, but just giving you the thing to get comfortable with first, which is G mixolydian, or think of it as C major, either one of those. Then we're back to just nice clean F major there. Again, if we were struggling over, what scale should we play over this chord? If you were thinking of it as G flat 7, it would just really kind of slow things down for us, like processing this and playing it smoothly. And truly, you just want to play melodic within that key there, even if someone plays a crunchy chord back there. And future goal can be to do something more altered here. If you want to, you can straight up play the C altered scale, and that'll do the trick. And you can play the altered scale on a dominant 7th chord that's resolving anytime, because that adds tension and then resolution. So, but sure enough, what we're writing here is just what scale do the chords come from, and what's our main option that we want to be able to improvise with before we worry about a bunch of other stuff. So for this chord here in the B section, G flat Lydian, that's the 4th mode of the major scale, and that is the same exact scale as D flat major. So if you just want to think of it as D flat major, that works for a couple of reasons. It allows the relationships that we talked about in the chord section to be the same. So the relationship from this to this is the same as the relationship from this to this and this to this, just like we said with the chord shapes. So with the scales, that is the case. So think of it either way as a collection of notes. The other thing is that the Lydian factor here, which means it has a sharp 11 or a sharp 4, that is a common note with this. It's the 5 of the parent key. So that's something that kind of softens a modulation to say, oh, what scale should we use on this key change that suddenly happened? Well, needs to have all the chord tones in it, and then fill in the notes that are as similar as possible to the key center that you came from. It's just one way to go about creating scales. There's always many scales, not always, but often many scales that can be used on a chord, and we just want to decide on one, get good at it, actually be able to play it before worrying about all the other options, because no one cares what option you play. They just care if it sounded nice and confident, basically, and melodic, right? And you can do that with anything. So all of these dominant 7th chords in the bridge, I just recommend mixolydian. Also, it sounds quite good to do Lydian dominant, and that's the same thing I said you could do here. That means it's mixolydian with, instead of a natural 4, it has a sharp 4. So Lydian dominant is dominant 7, mixolydian has a sharp 4 or a sharp 11 as a scale. The 4 moves up a half step. But default starter, just get good at mixolydian. And you can think of the parent scale instead. Just switch to E major if you want to do that. So that's pretty much all I need to say. These minor chords, just Dorian. And again, that allows the same exact relationship. For example, if this was E flat minor, like we said, to make it similar to all these, well, and then we would say E flat Dorian. Well, E flat Dorian is the 2 of D flat major, so it's like I said, same relationship scale-wise. So you can think E major there if you want. So F sharp Dorian, Mixolydian, Dorian, Mixolydian, Dorian, Dorian on these because it's a 2-5-2-5, so Dorian. And then these are altered chords. The 9 is messed up, the 5 is messed up. These are, the altered scale is straight up the scale to play on these. And I'll show you all the scale diagrams here and everything. And if it seems overwhelming, well, it is hard. It is definitely hard, and it takes time, and it's absolutely worth it working on changing scales measure by measure, as it just sounds so good to nail these. And so it's so worth it. And it just takes a long time. It takes a lot of work. It takes kind of back and forth and mapping out the guitar. But I will demonstrate how it sounds after the years of work that it took me to be able to do it even barely at all. So I'll demonstrate so you hear these scales changing as I improvise through the chord progression. Then we have the A section again, and that's the same. So just that's our scales overview. Now let's demonstrate all those scales, the scale shapes on the guitar for you, and then demonstrate the improvisation itself. Here's F major. I'll play all the scales in this collection as that root to root approach, starting on the root, pausing on the root, and ending on the root, and playing all the other notes otherwise. Because there are a lot of modes in this scale collection, so we want to hear the sound of the mode. Here's G Mixolydian. That's the same thing as C major, but it sounds like G Mixolydian if I treat the root in that way. Play it with what I call the root to root method. Here's G flat Lydian. Here's B Mixolydian. The next scale is F sharp Dorian, same as E major, but off of F sharp. The next scale is D Mixolydian. Next scale is G Dorian. Next scale is E flat Mixolydian. There are a lot of scales in this one. That E flat Mixolydian, though, is just a half step up from the D Mixolydian that we played. So even the shape itself is the same, even in the position that we're trying to play it in. Next one is A Dorian. Next one is the D altered scale. Very cool, eerie sound on that one. Next one is the C altered scale. I accidentally didn't play the root here again coming back, and it sounded very odd, but I should have. There it is. Now, those two altered scales are right next to each other, and so that's why we do a different shape. And of course, us guitarists, we spend a lot of time, if you learn a shape, like if you learn the D altered scale, learned how to improvise with it, you might say, okay, there's D, and so now if it's C altered scale, I'm going to jump to that, or if it's G altered scale, I'm going to jump to that. But that's why I'm showing you the scales. Yeah, we got to learn them all so we can play in one position like that. And just take it song by song. That's why I'm giving you all the scale diagrams in that way. Now I will demonstrate improvising with those over the chord progression, and I'm going to specifically stick to exactly those scale forms, exactly in the places that I showed you. And let's do it. this series, I'm giving you something I call the internalization tip, which is to go deeper into the song beyond just being able to play it. If you do all these tips, oh my gosh, you are just going to be expanding your musicianship skills beyond belief. The tip for this video is to do a chord melody arrangement, explore a chord melody arrangement, attempt a chord melody arrangement, study one, do chord melody on a tune you truly, truly want to know and truly want to internalize. Chord melody, even if the technique is so challenging, which it is, the study of the fretboard and the understanding of the song is so worth it. And we saw that in our little bridge study. Doing the chord melody of that is what allowed me to see, oh my gosh, look at this. Because my chord melody practice is something where I study all of the voicings I can use on various melodies and inversions of chords. So I know that if the 7 of a chord needs to be the melody, and I'm going to play that on the second string, and the chord is a major 7 chord, I'm going to use that first inversion chord shape. That's just the vocabulary that I have embedded in myself or studied and to understand enough to make an arrangement, hopefully quicker and quicker each time I do it, the more I know that stuff. This is what I teach in my course called Chord Melody Magic. But my own study of chord melody and just being able to arrange things has helped with the fretboard so much, and helped specifically understanding a song better. So if we go into the chord melody of the beginning of it, and I'm going to challenge myself and do it on the bottom 4 strings here, then this is the 9 of the chord, and then this is a voicing I can play below that to play F major 7. That's the major 7 on the bottom, then the 3rd, and then the 5 of the chord, and then the 9 up there. So I'm looking for always including the guide tones, the 3 and the 7, and then the 5 can be there or not, the root can be there or not, some other extension can be there or not, but the melody needs to be there, and the 3 and the 7 or the guide tones need to be there. So that's a voicing of it right there. And then we have to go do, 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 so do, 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 do. And so the voicing I'm going to use is this. Okay, that includes the 5 of F, the 9 of F, the 3 of F, and the 7 of F. And that moves between 7 and 6, which are both guide tones. Do, do, do. So now we have do, 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 do. Okay, and then we have to play that same thing but on G7. And I know this voicing pretty well. Flat 7, 3, 5, and then the root. Flat 7, 3, 5. It's just, I know that pretty well because there's no extensions, there's nothing fancy. If you want to play the root on this string and it's a dominant 7th chord, this is the voicing I use. Okay, and then we have to go 6, 6, 5, and that's the voicing I would use for that. This is 3, flat 7, 9, and then 6, 5 melody on the top. So here's the G7 part. Okay, and I'm showing you all of this for a reason because I want to show you something that's happening next, which is that this voicing here, the G minor, that's the flat 7 of G minor. And we need to go do, 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 do. Okay, so do. Okay, the flat 7, well, this is straight up 5, 1, flat 3, flat 7 of G minor 7, do, and then we're staying on that chord, and I'm going to play this, do, do, do. Whoa, check that out, do, 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 do. Okay, that's the G minor 7 part. Well, we did this at the beginning, do, 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 do. What? Do, do. Isn't that cool just how overlapping and how related things are? These same physical shapes, yes, they're representing different chords, but it's helping me understand the relationships of those chords and mapping out the fretboard better. And I can work on truly arranging it and rehearsing it and performing it as a separate task. And I can work on just studying the layout and arranging it as more of a chord melody design practice as its own thing, right? So don't worry about playing it perfectly when you're working this out. So those same shapes, and then we have C7, and then check it out. I want to show you this too. It's going to go down to do, do on C7. Well, that voicing is exactly what we played up here. So I hope just those couple little shares there help you see, oh, okay, well, if you do memorize this shape, G7, Melody is the third string, and it's the melody's on the top, obviously. Third string, okay? Bottom 4 strings can be this voicing. C is the root. The chord is C7. Third string, same voicing. So, da, 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 da. Okay, that's an interesting voicing for F major. This is 3, 7, 9, 5 of F major. Okay, and then we know the bridge. Da, 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 da. We have all that figured out. Well, that kind of covers almost the whole song. Let's just review what we have. For the A section, and then the beginning of the B section. So the point, though, is not to teach you that arrangement, but to show you walking through. And I worked that out obviously before the video, but not with much time, because I'm just, what are the voicings? I want to do it on the bottom 4 strings. That's the voicing I would use. That's the voice. So my point is, chord melody is worth studying on the songs that you care the most deeply about, because it is arduous. It truly is arduous. So, if you love the sound of it, you can work on truly playing it. But if there's just a song you want to know so deeply, absolutely working out some kind of chord melody exploration. Even if you feel like you're failing at it, you are learning a lot from those failures. You're learning a lot about your limitations on the fretboard as an arranger and all of that. So that is my internalization tip for this video. I will give you my Girl From Ipanema guitar listening recommendation in 1 second, but first, you can access and download the learning resources from this whole lesson series and from my other lessons on this channel by becoming a premium supporter. You will get PDFs of the chord progression lead sheet, the scale breakdowns sheet for soloing, the scale diagrams, the chord shape diagrams, and a custom-made backing track with me comping. You'll get everything except for the melody sheet music. I cannot give that away because this song is not in the public domain, but you can easily learn it from this video. That's why I demonstrated it so clearly with tabs on the screen for you. Some of the tunes in this series are in the public domain, and in that case, I absolutely provide the lead sheet and the tabs in the resources membership. And of course, I have resources for other lessons outside of this series as well. And I put out a lesson video every Tuesday. Just use the link in the top of the description to join and support and get all of those extra resources, or go to soundguitarlessons.com/join. If you want a jazz guitar listening recommendation for the Girl From Ipanema, of course, there are so many of them, because as we said, this has been recorded, possibly the second most recorded song of all time. But the guitar version that I recommend is by Baden Powell. There is a link to a playlist of all of my listening recommendations in the description, a YouTube playlist and a Spotify playlist, so you can check all of them out there. Make sure you listen to that or some other version, some specific version that you listen to a lot, so you can internalize how the phrasing sounds, how the tone sounds, how the actual music is expressed, instead of listening to it once or twice or listening to a bunch of versions. That's what I recommend, which is why I put that playlist together for you. And make sure you are subscribed, because I can't wait to see you in my next lesson that is coming up in this series. We're going to do song number 20. We're getting up there in the list. Song number 20 of the top 25 jazz standards for guitar players. And that tune is going to be Stella by Starlight. Please hit that like button, and please leave a comment to let me know if you liked this lesson. It really makes a difference, and it helps the video reach more people. And check out the description for all the links I've mentioned and for how you can support the channel. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching. Take care and happy practicing.